with ADHD women. What do you see as the common threads of struggle?
Worrying, judgment, anxiety. A massive common thread that I see is physical issues. And like you say, they've been gaslit by doctors. They've been passed from pillar to post. They've had unnecessary surgery, hysterectomies. And maybe if they looked at hormones or take different supplements or nutritional help or just being able to understand the stress that they're holding in their body from feeling different, not being understood, not being validated. Like, I know that pain. This has to be looked at and taken very seriously.
Kate Moryoussef is a renowned author,
ADHD coach specializing in women's well-being,
and host of the award-winning ADHD Women's Wellbeing podcast.
Through lived experience, speaking to global experts, neuroscientists, and psychiatrists,
she is an expert in all things female ADHD.
If they are in that crisis point, they really do need professional help. They need someone who understands psychological support, who really understands the impact of what neurodivergence has on mental health, because that junction in life of where they don't feel like they're going mad anymore, that someone's listening, that they're not imagining all of this. And there is a reason. It's not because they are broken or flawed or there's a deficit. And then we can be like, okay, now we feel a bit more empowered.
So much of this conversation, Kate, has been really focusing on the importance of being heard. When in your life did you feel most heard?
Probably.
Loyal listeners and viewers, I can't thank you enough for tuning in to ADHD Chatter, where we ask world-leading ADHD experts the hard questions to give you access to the most cutting-edge information on the topic. If you've ever felt broken or different, I hope this helps in your search for information, answers, and community. And do you know what would really help me in return? By clicking the follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening. It might not seem like much, but at ADHD Chatter, it means a huge deal. And with this, I can book more incredible guests and keep the self-discovery fire alive for all of us, including myself. Just one click of a button goes a lot further than you think. We'll promise to listen to your feedback and book the guests you want on topics that matter to you. And remember, you're not broken, just different, and you have always been enough. What's your mission within the world of ADHD?
I think my mission is to help women and girls understand themselves better, not feel shame, and to recognize the traits and the symptoms and not see them as a negative and not be embarrassed and be able to say, right, okay, this is what's going on for me. This is why I feel the way I do. This is my nervous system, this is my mood, my energy. And instead of it being like, oh my God, this is me now and it's going to be really hard, it's like, no, let's find different ways. Let's find new ways. Let's find ways that we can thrive and live well and be aware about who we are. So we can, I think I would definitely say, I'm thinking out loud here, that my mission would be just to create more understanding and more awareness. So the shame is gone, because even when I was diagnosed 5 years ago, there was so much shame and embarrassment and stigma and taboo, and I didn't want to talk about it, and I don't want that for other people.
Such a powerful mission, Kate. And you started your podcast. What do you think puts you in a position to spread that message and to push forward with that mission?
Yeah, so I started my podcast, which is the ADHD Women's Wellbeing podcast, back 3.5 years ago. And to me, when I first started it, I thought, who is going to want to hear about ADHD and women's well-being, apart from like a very small group of women? And I genuinely had no idea like how it would be received. And I never believed that it would grow and evolve the way it has. And this podcast, I genuinely believe, has been the door that has opened to so many, I would say, doctors, research, women, specialists, psychologists who have started to see ADHD in women differently, started to understand it more, have been able to see how pervasive it can be in women's life, in girls' life, and that this isn't just a, scratch the surface kind of situation. It runs so deep. It runs through families. It runs through generational patterns. And it's very important that we start taking this very seriously, because as we know, it can impact our health, mental health, physical health. We see people losing their lives to it. And it's really now is the time that we start taking this very seriously from across the medical board, across the therapeutic board, the education sector. Like this is, I never believed when I first started it, I never thought that it was going to kind of take me down this trajectory. I kind of thought, it'll just be a few nice conversations and we'll talk about breath work and, supplements. But I never believed that we would get to this point where I actually can see how I use the word pervasive again because it seeps into all parts of our life. And it's really important that people realize that.
Such a brilliant podcast you've started, Kate. And I think it's why I was so excited to bring you on, because you've spoken to hundreds and hundreds of world-leading experts on this topic, and to sort of have you here in the studio is such an honor, because I feel like through you, we're sort of drawing on the experience of so many. Starting from your own personal journey, your own diagnosis, what led you to realize that you personally have ADHD?
So my diagnosis came from having two brothers who were diagnosed back in late 80s, early 90s, and I was in between them. And so it was never once considered that I would have ADHD. I was quiet, I was easy, I didn't cause a fuss, I kept my head down. But again, as we see with so many girls, I was sort of looking out the window, I was distracted, I was anxious, I was internalizing everything. And my processing at school, I found it so hard. Why is everyone remembering all this information and I can't retain anything? Why can't I process this? Why is math so hard for me? Why do I just not understand chemistry? Like, why is it just not going into my brain? But it was never considered. ADHD was just never talked about in girls. And then fast forward, COVID, pandemic, homeschooling. I've got 3 daughters and a son. And I started to see traits that felt a little bit familiar to myself, but also from what I would hear growing up about ADHD and my brothers. And that's when I started doing some investigation. And it was my middle daughter, who was 9 at the time. And I knew there was something else going on. And even then, 5 years ago, they still, girls, it was like, it could be a bit of dyslexia. It could be a bit of dyspraxia. We're not quite sure. Maybe it's some processing. It was very wishy-washy. And I just came across this kind of description of what ADHD looks like in girls. And it was like this kind of like epiphany moment of, oh my God, that is what she's been dealing with.
Yes.
Like she couldn't sit on a chair. Like she literally couldn't sit on a chair. If I was trying to teach her while we were homeschooling, she'd be on the floor. And I just remember feeling like that's me. That I struggle to sit on a chair. So we both got diagnosed very quickly within each, I'd say 2 or 3 weeks. And that is when I went down this rabbit hole that has continued. And yeah, it's still continuing, and I'm still learning so much all the time. Especially I listen to people on your podcast, I listen to people coming onto my podcast, and it's just, you suddenly realize like how it integrates into our life in so many different ways. So yes, I'm definitely still on this mission.
Such a powerful mission, Kate. And it's almost such an echo of so many people, of feeling different, misunderstood, not understanding why. And then you get that diagnosis and you have this new paintbrush of color and context to add to years and years and years. And suddenly so much makes sense. From your amazing journey, what do you think that's taught you about helping other women in a similar position?
So what's interesting is that the lived experience, so I'm going through it myself. I've got 3 daughters, all diagnosed. And I work with lots of different people in my community. So coaching, workshops, one-to-one clients. And I see how it manifests very uniquely, very differently, very subtly, especially for women going through midlife with hormones, perimenopause, but I see it like puberty, postnatally. And it kind of mutates and changes in different periods of our life, whether we've got different stressors, we've got, hormones, different things going on, and it just kind of ebbs and flows and changes. And so that is why it's so important, because women may kind of think it's manageable oh, it's fine. I've probably just got a little bit of a touch of ADHD and it's manageable. And then certain things happen, you know, big life changes and stresses and illness, divorce, grief, career change, and then the ADHD just rears its head. And, you know, the anxiety we were just about managing, or the RSD we sort of had in control, you know, control of. And it all just feels very out of control and unmanageable and very difficult. And that is where a lot of people come to me and say, I've kind of suspected, but now it kind of feels like a bit of a crescendo going on in my life, and I don't think I can manage this anymore. And that's when it feels really heartbreaking, because for women especially, we've been holding it together. We hold things, we hold relationships together, families together, kids, responsibilities, commitments, friendships. And it's kind of like, you know, a thread that unravels, and then everything just kind of you know, crumbles, and we struggle a lot. And the ADHD really tips us over the edge.
It's one of the biggest injustices ever, how much, and I'm sure you'll agree, women and girls have been missed and let down, specifically in the conversation surrounding ADHD, and how many were made to feel crazy by people close to them, even their doctors, for so many years. Misdiagnosed with an anxiety disorder, told to just stop being so sensitive, or that they were just too much or not enough. And then you get that diagnosis at whatever age that comes for you. And there can be a lot of grief, a lot of looking back and anger at why you were missed for so many years and what could have been different if that had been picked up sooner. I mean, you've spoken to, you know, you're in a really unique position. You've spoken to so many ADHD women, both personally and expertly. What do you see as the common threads of struggle with ADHD women that you've spoken to?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of common threads. Overwhelm, for sure. Anxiety, worrying, judgment, fear of not being able to hold it all together. I would say hormones. I always come back to hormones and our nervous system. You know, this sort of combined kind of impact of what the overwhelm is doing to this sort of stress response in our body. A massive common thread that I see is physical, you know, issues. A lot of inflammation, gut issues, chronic pain, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, women's health issues such as like endometriosis, migraines. And there's not one woman who has been diagnosed late in life with ADHD that hasn't got a flurry of these sort of overlapping conditions. And that, you know, I really haven't met anyone that just goes, oh no, it's just a little bit of ADHD that I struggle with.
Yes.
You know, whether it's insomnia, they've had like really difficult, you know, reproductive health issues that they've, you know, really struggled with. And like you say, they've been gaslit by doctors. They've been passed from pillar to post. They've had unnecessary surgery, you know, hysterectomies, like really invasive surgeries where, you know, maybe if they looked at hormones or taken away synthetic hormones and offered more holistic treatments or understood how they needed to move their body more or take different supplements or nutritional help or, you know, somatic work, just being able to understand the stress that they're holding in their body from feeling different, not being understood, not being validated. And that cacophony of everything blending together, it reaches a boiling point. It's like a volcano. And that is when they come to me. Yeah. that's when I get the emails at like 11 o'clock at night going, I think I need to come to you, or when's your next workshop, or how can you help me, or can you point me to resources? And, you know, I get a lot of emails, and it's hard for me because I'm often overwhelmed, and I'm definitely going to respond, and I feel awful if sometimes I don't respond. But I feel their pain when I'm reading it. Like, I know that pain because look at the time they're sending it to me. They've sent me like a whole life story, and it's the same life stories of so many women, so many, you know, whether it's divorce, abuse, estrangement, difficulty with their children, addiction. For me, it's heartbreaking. And that's what gets me out of bed every morning, is that this has to be looked at and taken very seriously by the minute someone comes into their GP and they say, I've listened to a podcast, I've read an article, I actually think this is me, and the GP listens and doesn't say, here's some anti-anxiety medication. That GP says, tell me very briefly, what's your life story? What's your family history? What's going on health-wise? And the GP can piece it together. And that is what I hope, is that, yes, I know that they're overstretched, the GPs, but for them to almost be able to say, right, connect dots, piece it together, create a pattern, right, I need to fast track this person to go and get diagnosis, assessment, medication, coaching, therapy, whatever we can do to help, because we know that unfortunately suicide in women, midlife women, is very high in neurodivergent women, and we have to get that help, way before we get to that point of desperation.
If someone's at that point of desperation, Kate, previously they were struggling, overwhelm, anxiety was there, but they were getting by. They were coping with it, and something tipped them over to the point of crisis. And you alluded to a few examples. It could be a divorce, or children could come into the mix, or the menopause, various things, and it tips them over into that point of really needing desperate help. At that phase in a woman's life, what could be said or done to really soothe or to release some of that pressure?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's hard because, if they are in that crisis point, they really do need professional help. They need someone who understands psychological, support, who is neuroaffirming, who really understands the impact of what neurodivergence has on mental health, or of undiagnosed or not understood, or they only just getting that awareness and they're like, oh my God, okay, so I'm potentially autistic, ADHD, both. No wonder I felt like this, like sensory overwhelm, not feeling like they can do day-to-day tasks and activities, where they struggle with friendships and relationships. And I think the validation and the understanding and that compassion and support is a massive, massive thing for women at crisis point, of a professional saying, there's a very high chance that you could be neurodivergent, and this is why you've experienced this over your lifetime, and we're going to get you some help, and we're going to find support and, a diagnosis, because that kind of junction in life of where they don't feel like they're going mad anymore, that someone's listening, that they're not imagining all of this. And there is a reason. It's not because they are broken or flawed, or there's a deficit, that they are just, they're wired differently. They're more sensitive. Their nervous systems process the world differently. Our hormones react differently. And then we can be like, okay, now we feel a bit more empowered. Now it's okay. Like, now I know what's going on. And we always know, knowledge is power. Who can help me? Where can I get support? What can I read? What can I listen to? And very often that is where women make a bit of a change. They say, right, that's when I start feeling better, because I've got that education, that psychoeducation and the awareness.
Yeah, it's really powerful, Kate. And I really got emotional there, because I know it's conversations like this and the work that you're doing that is saving a whole new generation of women coming through without that misunderstanding or feeling of being misunderstood. The reality is, many people have been told that they're too much, too sensitive, and they have been missed. A whole generation of missed women before conversations like this happened. If a woman slips through the net and they go for years without understanding why and not having that meaning to supplement their behavior, what can that feeling of misunderstood do to one's self-esteem, do you think?
It can take a huge knocking. Imposter syndrome, not reaching potential, not working with what is aligned to them, to their energy, to what their authenticity, their truth. They feel like they're probably living in a body that they're kind of, it's very misaligned, and they don't quite feel that they fit. And I think the word self-esteem is exactly what happens. They don't trust themselves. They don't believe in themselves. They don't see how they can bring any kind of good to the world, because everything that they try just feels like a struggle or a challenge. it's just constantly like putting a jigsaw piece that doesn't fit and like cramming it in and pushing it. And no matter what you do, that piece won't fit unless you know that it's in the wrong place. So I always go back to like, let's build the awareness. Let's talk about it without judgment. Let's, just find a place in society where this conversation is no longer stigmatized and not, everyone's talking about it and everyone's this and that, and just be like, yeah, okay. And maybe certain careers or certain ways of working aren't right for us, but let's find a way that is right for us. And as you probably know, and I know you've seen in your career, is that when we work with what we feel passionate about and what aligns with us and where, what's suited kind of time-wise, energy-wise, sensory, environment-wise, we fly. We really can fly. And that is what I want to be able to talk about, especially for women whose self-esteem has taken a knocking and they've gone through lots of different careers and they just feel like they just can't really amount to much because no one's really believed in them and they've not believed in themselves either.
A quick word from our sponsors to address a big ADHD issue, the notebook fallacy. We all convince ourselves that buying that one magic notebook will solve all of our problems, but it never does. Nor does the second one, or the third, or the 10th. Well, Tiimo app is more useful than having all the notebooks in the world. And what use are notebooks if you keep losing your pen anyway? Tiimo app has hugely helped me organize my chaotic life by offering the most user-friendly interface an organizational app has to offer. The difference is, it's designed by neurodiverse brains for neurodiverse brains. And you can tell, it's built to adapt to your neurodiverse way of thinking and be flexible to your way of planning. And now it's even more simple with the AI planning assistant. Tiimo now offers an incredible new voice transcribing service, making it even easier to use. A simple voice prompt when you have to plan something or something pops into your mind, and the new AI planning assistant hears it and transcribes it instantly into an easily digestible list of instructions for you to remember. Tiimo is here to help you simplify planning, build focus, and make life happen. No more decision paralysis. The new AI planning assistant makes it so quick and easy to insert information, you can do it before you've forgotten or been distracted. Give it a go and use the link in my bio for 30% off. Just a note though, this code is only applicable on the web browser, not on the smartphone. Then when Tiimo solves all of your problems, go ahead and use your notebooks for something useful, like propping up a wobbly table leg or mopping up a spilt coffee. Back to the episode. They're trying to sort of force a jigsaw piece into a puzzle that doesn't fit the slot. It almost perfectly summarizes the whole conversation. What emotions do you think encapsulates that feeling of being misunderstood in women?
Probably the emotions would be sadness, feeling lost, feeling like they don't fit in, feeling separate, feeling like they want to be part of something, rejected. There's a feeling of deep sadness, I think. And then when some women are very lucky and they kind of know they're a bit, although use words like quirky or different, they've never really been able to have a label or anything. And they've found like their tribe. Maybe they've just worked in a very creative industry. They've been around a very loving, non-judgmental family. And they've just found a way of it working, even though they've not quite understood, maybe it's ADHD or autism or the combined, ADHD. And it's worked for them and they just feel like, oh, okay, I can breathe. I would say it's a feeling of feeling choked and stifled because we don't have the language, or we didn't have the language. And no one was understanding us. And someone said this word to me the other day on the podcast of emotional safety.
Yes.
And I was like, that is so profound, because if you're not feeling safe in your friendships, in your relationships, in your family, your nervous system's always on stress response. It's hypervigilant. You can't relax. You can't speak authentically. You can't be yourself. And how, the impact of masking your whole life, the weight and the heaviness of just not being able to be yourself is really, really hard. And some people need to go and live in another country. They need to go away, far, far away, and they need to go and find themselves, or they need to change careers, or they need to, I don't know, do something quite drastic to be able to find that part of them. Or they can just have a really vulnerable conversation with the people that they love. And I think we have to be more open to having these uncomfortable conversations and explaining how we feel, and I hope creating more emotional safety with the people that we love, because very often we don't want to break up relationships and we want our families to understand us, but sometimes it can just feel so hard to have a conversation about why we feel different or why we want to change things. So yeah, emotional safety is a really big one.
Where do you think the feeling of difference comes from? We know there's that statistic that ADHD children are exposed to 20,000 more negative comments when they were younger, little micro corrections, little adjustments to of who they are presenting. Do you think as a consequence of that, ADHD women have an innate feeling of not being enough?
Yes. I think we're very critical and self-judgmental on ourselves. I think we're the worst. We're our worst critics for sure. We're perfectionists. We're people pleasers. So we internalize all of this. So someone else can judge us and someone else can correct and criticize us, but no one's doing it any worse than we're doing it ourselves. And that's hard to live with. So if you've got such a high bar of expectation on yourself, and we're never quite fulfilling that. That's exhausting. I mean, I definitely do that to myself. I put myself in such a high bar of what I should be achieving and what I should be producing and, what my day should have looked like and what all these different things, that it's crazy. And I know what I've done over the past 3 or 4 years it's been really like big, a podcast, written a book, 4 kids, marriage, keeping my family, all of that. I felt so burnt out so many different times. No one should put that pressure and expectation on themselves, but I've put that pressure on me. So there is an element of us, I think, that we just put a huge amount of pressure on ourselves. But it's intertwined with so many the other parts of how our ADHD shows up, which is all our ideas. We want to do everything. We come up with, as you probably know as well, lots of ideas.
Yes.
We're like, oh, okay, I need to do that. And I need to do it like tomorrow. And then we underestimate the impact of piling all the things, the commitments and the yeses that we've said. And so now I'm really trying to practice what I preach and really put those boundaries in and strip things back and say no more and say yes to the things that really do matter. And it's work in progress. But we have to keep doing that because we can crumble so easily and we can get overwhelmed and burnt out so easily. It's a very fine line.
You mentioned people pleasing earlier. Do you think people with ADHD are more likely to be people pleasers?
I think so. Yeah, I do think so. I mean, I've noticed it a lot in myself, some of my kids. I see it a lot in my community that we are trying to please people because maybe we've been told that we're doing things wrong or we shouldn't be like that or we need to change. Or we fear, that it comes with the rejection sensitive dysphoria, that we fear that ostracization. So we're always trying to be malleable and mold ourselves towards what is more sort of conventional, what people want from us. And that fear of upsetting someone if we do say no, or we push back, or we say, that's not good for us. I have it all the time, and it's genuinely like a muscle I have to practice. I have to kind of build myself up. It's kind of like doing star jumps and whatever, and it's like, right, come on. And I do it, and I'm like, that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. But I build it up so much in my head that I burn myself out, exhaust myself just by the build-up of trying to push back my people-pleasing a little bit. So it goes to the internal, how constant this internal kind of motor is. It's just non-stop.
I guess if rejection is so painful for us, so physiologically painful for us, that we go to drastic lengths to protect ourselves from experiencing that pain.
Yeah.
And if we sense any disapproval from somebody, and that could be direct, it could be a direct criticism, or it could be an indirect perceived criticism, like the tiniest change in tone of voice, or we sort of we sense a slight heavier footstep and we think that person hates us. It sounds epically obscure to many, but if you've got ADHD, you really feel this to be true. And as a consequence of that effort to avoid that trigger, we go to all lengths to avoid disapproval. So we do people please because we're so scared of standing up for ourselves because that exposes us to a criticism.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
What do you think the repercussions are of people pleasing if you don't put yourself first?
Genuinely, it's our health. It really is. It's always our health, you know, and the amount of people that I speak to who have had cycles of burnout, it's just part and parcel of their life.
Yes.
Or chronic pain or migraines and they have to go to bed for 2 days. Severe, you know, gut issues. It's always presents in physical health conditions. And if you think about suppressing and repressing ourselves and we're just constantly internalizing from a physiological perspective, it's creating inflammation and it can just present itself wherever, you know, whether it's, you know, a bad back, tight shoulders, you know, I go back to the migraines because I just know that's, you know, quite common. And it is our physical health. So the amount of times I've gone to a chiropractor or a physio and I said, my back, oh my God, my lower back. And he's like, well, what have you done? I said, nothing really. I might have just bent down into the dishwasher wrong and I've like pulled, you know, some crazy sort of spasm. But I know it's a build-up. I can feel it over the weeks and the months, like a tweak and a tweak. And then something very small just, you know, goes and then that's, and I've had that a few times, but I see it present in lots of different ways. So I always, you know, if I speak to a client of mine and they think it's just a minimal thing, that the people pleasing or the boundaries or the saying yes all the time or overcommitting, and I try and explain to them that actually you need to see this as a much bigger thing because tell me a little bit about your health, what's going on with your sleep, all of that, and the knock-on effect that has, it's always that. So yeah, I don't think, I'd be so interested to know if someone doesn't have any physical health conditions due to internalized ADHD.
I suppose people-pleasing probably extends to masking as well, because I guess in essence, masking is changing who you are to avoid disapproval. Do you think women mask more than men in the ADHD sphere?
I think they probably do because women can be quite good chameleons and we can, I think from a societal perspective, women have had to sort of be told, you know, don't do that. That's, you know, that can rock the boat, or don't assert your power, or don't be too assertive, don't be too aggressive. Like, I think very much from a societal perspective, women have been suppressed, as we know. Bring in neurodivergence, which we've not understood. So if women are slightly different or more outspoken or a bit louder or a bit quirkier or more likely to say something that's kind of quite provocative, then yes, we will have been told to, you know. So I think, I do believe we're in an inflection point though, because women's empowerment is, you know, is there. It's not going anywhere. We're getting stronger. We're getting more vocal. And we're also recognizing that it's not as dangerous to speak our truth. It was dangerous, like physically dangerous to speak our truth. And it still is in lots of countries. We're now recognizing, even though in our nervous system, it's kind of still programmed to be quiet and to not say anything too kind of destructive. But there's like a, I don't know, there's a fire in a lot of women's bellies now where we're just being like, you know what? No, we're ready to kind of be authentic. We're ready to be ourselves. And if people don't like it, that's their problem. And I am seeing that a lot. It's still there, this masking, the people pleasing. It's part of the sort of a female trait, but I do see it in men as well, very much so. I really do. And I don't think it's just a female trait, and I don't like the idea of it just being female male traits. I think they overlap. I think they show it very differently in, you know, different capacities, but I do believe that men, I don't want to overlook men at all, especially men who are not outwardly hyperactive ADHD. So yeah, I think men can mask as well.
Many people, Kate, with ADHD, from my experience, sort of have a comfort zone, like a safe place that they feel comfortable in. But in my case, it's certainly the case that I can overcommit and take on too many plans. And then when one gets cancelled at the last minute, I can be very relieved. I sort of actually get quite euphoric.
Yes.
Because it means I can retreat back to my safe space.
Yeah.
Do you notice that trend with the people that you speak to?
So it's actually funny that you say that, because a lot of the guests on my podcast are often neurodivergent as well. And it was only this week I went through my schedule for next week. And because of the build-up to my book, my schedule is just too busy. It's too crammed. And I looked at it and I was like, something I need to start moving and rescheduling. So I sent a couple of emails apologizing and saying, could we push our podcast, back a few more months? And the response back was from the other neurodivergent guest was, oh, thank you so much. You've done me a favor because I've overcommitted as well. So it's often this sort of like ripple effect of everyone overcommitting, because we all feel very passionate and we've all got a big job that we want to do and we want to help people and we want to make a change, but it's at the detriment of our own well-being as well. So yes, I'm a huge overcommitter, but I'm trying really now. And very often I do send emails to people and I'm very open about it, because I feel that thankfully I work in a space where I can say the words like, I'm feeling exhausted or burnt out, and I know that I need to kind of like shave a few things off, and they're fine with it as well. So it feels really good.
Well, I get a text message saying, I'm really sorry, Alex, I need to cancel. Such a relief.
Yes, don't worry.
With the people you speak to, Kate, do you notice contradictions in the way that they feel about themselves? In other words, do you get people describing themselves as introverted extroverts? And what do I mean by that? I mean, they could want to be very social, but also simultaneously feel very exhausted by socializing.
Yeah. I mean, I'll speak personally because that is me 100%. I need to recharge my batteries. I would say 30% of the time socially, I really enjoy it, but 70% of the time I need alone time. I need quiet time. I need to be walking my dog in nature.
Yes.
I just not to not be around anything. But for that 30% of the time, I can give it all my all. So for example, today, I can do this. I'm having a great time, love it. And I will probably need about 7 hours of decompression time afterwards. So what's that? I'm not very good at maths, but it's kind of like, a third of my time I can be sociable and the rest is I'm constantly needing to decompress.
Yeah, absolutely. I call my sofa my recharging mat.
Yes.
Speaking of at-home objects, Kate, do you have any guides to ease the ADHD mind? Something someone could do whilst at home?
So I think it's very personal for sure. I mean, I love a bath. I always talk about this. For me, a bath is everything with the Epsom salts and oils. I have my iPad, books. I have like a little area, and that water for me has always been where I can just decompress. It just depends what people need, whether that's a sauna, whether it's going for a walk or being outdoors. I think we all have something, I would say. We all have something that we need as that recharging kind of zone. And if you don't have that and you can't recognize it, it's really important to find it and to recognize it. Because if we don't, then we're not being conscious of how easily depleted we are and how easily burnt out we are. So we it's like always knowing that we've got a charger with us in our bag.
Yes.
It's always knowing how we can recharge and re-nourish ourselves, because we have finite energy and our nervous systems they are more sensitive. We know that, and we need to be able to nurture that so we can do all the good stuff and the cool stuff that we want to do. And I'm sure you're probably the same, Alex, is that you can do all of this, you can go and do all your speaking gigs and all the stuff, but you then need to go and retreat. And to not have that awareness can be very detrimental.
Absolutely, yeah. The bath is hugely relatable to me. In fact, one of the items behind me on the shelf is a bath for that exact reason. It's just having that time to reflect and understand where you are on your sort of barometer of energy.
Yes.
Because if you don't take those moments out to really reflect and take stock, you can overcommit, you can take on too much, and you don't see the burnout creeping up until you snap at your partner or you order a takeaway or you miss your morning exercise routine. It's so important to have those moments out to really reflect and almost spot if you are approaching burnout and take your foot off the pedal.
Yeah.
Have you got any advice, Kate, for the younger version of you or the younger version of anyone who might be listening or a young woman who is feeling lost and confused?
Advice in what capacity? As in, I feel that there's so much to say on that because it could be from so many different angles, whether what they choose to do career-wise, health-wise, their well-being. But I would definitely say, I look at, again, my children. I've got teenage girls. I've got nieces who are neurodivergent. I look at friends' children, and I just want for them more self-compassion and more understanding without having to resort to the shame or the changing or the masking, or if I just do this, if I just try harder, if I just change. I just want there to be a way that these girls can develop and look after themselves and kind of know themselves, deeply know themselves, what makes them tick, what burns them out, what isn't good for them from a sensory perspective, what doesn't feel truthful and aligned to them, what are they saying yes to when they really don't want to be saying yes, where are they putting themselves in positions where actually their power's being taken away, and making choices that feel good to them and not doing it for other people, not trying to please other people. And that's what I would say is just start, get to know yourself really well.
Yes.
Really get to know what feels good to you, and make aligned choices that just because society says that you have to do it this way.
Yes.
Really question, be curious. And I do think we're at this age, maybe with AI now, and we're kind of starting to realize this, what's AI going to do in the world? What's AI going to do with people who've got certain degrees and certain jobs? All of this. And I think it's potentially highlighting a way of living and working and being that doesn't have to be the same as it was. And I don't know what AI will do, but I do know that it's opening up a new landscape. And I think that's exciting.
Absolutely. So much of this conversation, Kate, has been really focusing on the importance of being heard and understood. So I suppose my final question is, when in your life did you feel most heard, most understood, and most loved?
Probably working in my community, working with the women, when I'm doing workshops. I look at their faces and I see the pain and the grief and the sadness, and it mirrors back. And I see family members, I see generations of different women in my family that I know weren't understood. And that is where I feel that there's this need for women to feel heard and feel validated. And when they do, even women who are in their 60s and their 70s, who say that podcast that you did, or that workshop that you did, or that conversation that you had with so-and-so, that was the first time I ever felt like I understood myself. And I don't want women to get to their 60s and their 70s to finally have that moment in their life. I don't think anyone should get to that point in their life, and finally feel validated.
Thank you so much, Kate. This has been incredible, and a personal thank you from me, because when I got my diagnosis 2 years ago, I think I told you before when we had our first chat, your podcast was what I dived into to help me understand my own diagnosis. So personally, a huge thank you. And on behalf of all the listeners and watchers of ADHD Chatter, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And you've given me your book very kindly, the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Toolkit, which I'm super excited to dive into as well.
Thank you.
Just penultimately, Kate, your ADHD item has been patiently waiting underneath that cloth on the table in front of us for the whole conversation. I'm going to reveal it now.
Okay.
Dun, 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 dun. That is, well, obviously, it's a pair of scales. So
Antique scales.
antique scales.
Yes.
Why does antique scales represent ADHD?
So for me, I remember seeing these in my mum's kitchen growing up, and I used to play with the weights and put them on and everything. And then when you asked me what kind of representation in my head, and for me, it's always that small thing that tips me over.
Right.
So I can keep
yes.
adding, and I can write a book, and I can do the podcast, and I can do this, and I can do all the parenting. And then someone might just say to me, can you just do this small thing? And that is when I go into complete overwhelm. My nervous system just shuts down, and I just feel and then I just want to shut down everything. Literally, it's like that one thing tips me over. And straight away, this visual in my head came up of these antique scales from my childhood, because you can see the tiny little weight, how small that is. And that is what can tip me over the edge.
Tiny little 10-gram weight compared to the 500 and 200 grams.
Yeah, so pile the 500, pile all these crazy stressful things, and I'm fine. But ask me to do one small thing, and that's what tips me over the edge. And it can be really hard for a family member or a partner to see the rationale. They're like, where's your perspective? Like you've held all of this, you've done all of this, and this one thing that someone's asked you to do, or this commitment that you don't really want to do, or this sensory overload, and all of a sudden you're in a complete state of overwhelm. And I actually do think that is why people don't understand ADHD so much, because they see us doing, and adding more things and wanting to do more, because we have so much energy and ambition and passion and enthusiasm. But if we just add something that might not quite work at the time, then it can all go to pot. So that's why I chose this.
And I suppose the ADHD person is so good at playing a character called normal and hiding the struggles that the people around them don't see the weights building up. And when the tiny little weight gets added, and that's the tipping point, they can change quite quickly. And I suppose from an outsider who hasn't seen the build-up, because it's invisible inside their heads, you could be called Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because the transition is so sudden.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what you said then. There's so much going on in our heads, and we're holding it all, and it's constant. It's just a constant kind of like puzzle that we're piecing together, and it just takes one thing. It can be like my kids, if I'm in the kitchen and I'll be in my head and I'll be thinking and I'll be doing something, and they'll go, "Mum," and I go, "What?" Yes, and then they'll be like, "I just wanted to ask what's for dinner," and that's me. And then I realize, okay, I've taken too much on. There's too much going on for me here, and I don't want it to be, my kids getting the brunt of that, or my husband getting the brunt of that, which they often do, unfortunately.
Such a powerful and extremely accurate visual representation of the ADHD experience for many. Just finally, Kate, I want to do the ADHD agony aunt section, which is called the washing machine of woes, because my ADHD item is a washing machine, because it represents memory. I always forget my laundry in the machine. And I do ask everyone, do you forget your laundry in the machine?
Well, I don't even do the laundry. That's how bad my ADHD is. My husband, who is more kind of, I would say, on the autistic spectrum, loves washing.
Perfect yin to your
and
yang.
I'm not allowed to go near the washing. And so he is he's on my washing machine. I do other stuff, just so you know, but he's in charge of all the washing, because he knows that for that reason I would put a wash on and completely forget about it. So my poor kids would never get clean uniform or anything. Right. So he's fully in charge of the washing, and I'm fully in charge of the cooking.
The perfect partnership. I have been using the Tiimo app, though, actually. They've actually been really, really helpful in helping me to remember the washing. So if anyone is listening, I do recommend the Tiimo app. This week, Kate, in the washing machine of woes, somebody has written in and asked, I'm 43 and diagnosed late. I still have trouble making friends even now. But I hear that finding your tribe is so important. Why is it so important? And how do I find them?
So yes, I would say 100% that finding a tribe really is so powerful. And for a lot of ADHD women, they get diagnosed because a friend's been diagnosed, and they suddenly see, oh, that's why we're all friends. We're all neurodivergent.
Yes.
You know, you're a little bit more like this and that, but there's this sort of blend of like neurodivergent women all sort of come together, having lots of fun and talking over each other and forgetting things and not turning up, and everyone's birthday's forgotten. But because of that, you feel accepted. You don't feel judged. No one is, you know, if you turn up late, no one's that bothered.
Yes.
But if you haven't found that tribe, you can constantly feel like you're never doing enough, or you're not good enough, or you're a bad friend. So I would say to that person to find your tribe. You know, figure out like, what is it that lights you up? You know, what did you used to love doing as a kid? And then as an adult was sort of like told to, you know, that's not appropriate anymore. Get really creative, find something that you just think, you know what? You know, is it a rock choir? Is it a pottery class? Is it a running club?
Yes.
Is it a trampolining class? Whatever that is. And just go and try it. And yes, it's really scary turning up on your own. It's terrifying. I've done it. But you will always end up, I promise you, if you go and be quite niche with where you go and, you know, try, you will always find someone that is in your tribe. No matter what, you'll spot them from a mile away.
Absolutely. Amazing advice, Kate, to end on. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Alex.
Just finally, Kate, we have one more section, which is I'm going to deliver a letter to you that was written by the previous guest.
Oh.
Every week, Kate, I ask the guest after the interview to write down their 3 rules to live by, and they post it in that post office, and I deliver it to the next guest, which today is yourself.
Oh, I love this. I love a letter. Thank you. So 3 rules to live by. Be kind to yourself always. Be gracious to those you meet, and be a lifelong learner. I mean, I couldn't have written anything better.
3 perfect rules.
Yeah, be a lifelong learner. That is 100%. I'm aligned to that. Those are really lovely.
Thank you so much.
Do I get to keep these?
You
or
can,
not?
yes. Yeah. Once again, Kate, thank you on behalf of everyone grappling to understand the brain. Thank you so much.
Thank you.